What's up? We are back and with RK Castillo here, and if you didn't check out the last one talking about the poor and needy, check that out. RK is a ninja pastor when it comes to talking about the poor and needy. Yeah, so right now we're going to talk about the 5 levels of discipleship, and this is a concept that RK has come up with, and we've chatted briefly about it, but I'm excited to really get into it. Yeah, so let's just go for it.
Yeah, you know, I got to say, I didn't come up with it. I discovered it on the internet. I was in a meeting full of pastors, and I'd been thinking about something. So we work with the homeless, and our job is to raise up followers and fishers who train up other followers and fishers, right? Jesus says, come follow me and I'm gonna make you fishermen. So those are the 3 jobs of every single disciple of Jesus. Follow Jesus, obey what he said to do, go on fishing, share the good news about the kingdom all over the world with as many people as you can, and then train others to follow and fish. And so our group of homeless that we're working with, we've been working and raising them up and sending them out to be disciple makers for years we've been doing this. And it's been hard trying to get them. And then one day in our pastors meeting, one of the pastors says, oh, it's like the 5 levels of discipleship. And so I asked him, I said, what is that? And he says, oh, and then I went and I looked on the internet and I looked it up, and I said, oh my gosh, I've been trying to get my homeless people to act like grandparents when they're all either infants or or children, I guess I should say.
Yeah, so let's talk about each of those levels of what are the characteristics of an infant disciple.
So an infant disciple, so imagine, your son is 1 year old right now. You know, when he was an infant, what did you really expect from him?
Nothing.
Right? It's like he's gonna make messes and you're gonna have to help him and feed him. So when you get someone who is an infant follower of Jesus, you need to basically share with them, well, first you got to invite them into your life, because you're gonna have to teach them a whole new way of living, right? You're gonna have to share with them new habits and a new way of thinking. And so an infant's primary thing that you need to do is share with them so that you can help them figure out this new way of life. And I realize, man, we have a whole bunch of infants sitting in churches, especially if your church is the type of church that you go to it and there's never any sort of accountability to be living a life according to Jesus. So you could be an infant, come to church, and never really be held accountable to live a new way of life. Imagine if your son is born and you just say, hey son, I'm going to have a 45-minute meeting with you every single week, and that's where you hear like a lesson on how to live your life, and the other 6 days of the week, you know, you could try to do it, but I'll never actually check if you're doing it or not. I'm just assuming you are. You know? And so you get people stuck in the infant and child stages sometimes for decades, unless there's someone willing to sit there and disciple them.
That's good. What are some of the characteristics of the child stage? So
a child stage, man, like as I've sat and thought about it, a child is largely marked by selfishness and self-centeredness. So, you know, if you're in the child stage of discipleship, a lot of times, like the words that are coming out of the mouth, they reveal what stage of the discipleship process you're in, right? From the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if you say things like, oh man, you know, like I didn't really like the worship this week at church, right? Or, man, I don't really like the way the pastor teaches. I don't like his Bible, the way he teaches the Bible, you know, like, and it's all about you and what you like or dislike. That shows what stage you're in. You are still a child in the faith, because to think that worship is about you and what you like, you've totally missed the point that it has nothing to do with you. Right? You're not worshiping you. You're not worshiping the worship band. You're worshiping God. And so to say, like, I don't really like the worship, it reveals that you're still very immature in your thinking. And so someone who is in a child stage, you need to connect them. You need to connect them to 3 things, I think. You need to connect them to some sort of intimate small group where they can be held accountable. Right? You need to connect them to Jesus in the presence of God, and you need to connect them with the purpose, right? And this is one of the things that we've been talking about for a number of weeks. Like Jesus is praying in John 17, and he says, I brought you glory on this earth, he's talking to his Father, by completing the work you've given me to do. So 2 things bring glory to God on this earth: understanding what our job is and what it looks like when it's done, and then actually finishing it. right? And so if I was to take a group of people and say, what is your purpose in life and what does it look like when it's finished? Most people would have no clue, right? And so you don't know, you don't understand your purpose in life. You don't know how to glorify God with your life. So again, it's going to be about you. It's going to be self-centered, and you need someone over you to in a small group setting, to connect you to God and to His Word and say, look, this is the purpose of you living. This is what I think you need to do. You know?
It's good. Yeah, I wonder if a lot of our pastoral problems could be solved by connecting people to their purpose. Like, what are the common things that you're in kind of counseling, pastoring meetings? I think a lot of times maybe people are just bored and they have too much time to think, and it's just like when you're on purpose, when you're you know, doing things, it's just like all of those things kind of take a back seat as you're advancing forward. And so I think a lot of times, yeah, maybe one of the best pastoral techniques could be to just connect people right in with what were you created for, and let's get after it and let's do it, because that helps you kind of leave behind some of the things that you're sitting and thinking about, some of the harder things that happen to people. So I think that's really good.
You know, a couple things that come to my mind. First, whenever someone comes to me and says you need to, right, I always say, look, whenever you point the finger at me, there's three pointing right back at you, because whenever you tell me that I need to do something, it's actually your responsibility, right? It's because I remember when I was meeting with my missions team I used to travel with, and we had a meeting, and I was like, hey, we would go to public schools and we'd do public school assemblies talking about, you know, anti-bullying, anti-drugs, and whatnot. And I remember saying, hey, we need to trust God, that God will pour out His Spirit. He can still do miracles. We can still see people get saved, even if we can't publicly share the gospel, you know, blah, 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 blah. Finally, my leader looks at me and he goes, maybe that's what you're called to do with your life. He goes, every intercessor will think we need to pray more, you know. The evangelist will say we're not preaching the gospel enough, you know, and the pastor will say we're not taking care of enough people. The teacher will say we're not reading the Bible, and you know, like, so whatever you've been called and designed by God to do is what you think we need to do more of. So if you come to me and say, hey, you need to do more of this, just realize that there's three more fingers saying, boom, that's your responsibility. You know, the other thing I think is largely wrong, I call them mind skins, mindset shifts that I think we need to make in the Western church, because you know, Jesus says you can't take new wine and putting in old wineskins. So I don't think you take the new thing that God is doing and put it in old mindsets, right? So we need to change our mindskins. One of the main mindskin shifts that I think we need to make is we need to shift from being on a cruise ship to being on a battleship. So for example, you go on a cruise ship, your whole purpose is to go there, eat there, get fat, and be entertained, right? Like, that's what you do on a cruise ship. But you go on a battleship, your entertainment and you being fed and entertained is very low priority in the life of what someone does on a battleship. Now, if you look at what the Bible says, when you sign up to follow Jesus, you immediately signed up to be a part of a invading army that's going to go and take the kingdom back from the kingdom of darkness, right? Like, you signed up to be on a battleship, not on a cruise ship. So if your life is like, well, I don't really like to worship, I don't like the Bible teaching, it tells me that you're still in the cruise ship mentality, wanting to be fed and entertained, rather than going there and being on a mission that God wants you to do and take whatever city you're in, nation you're in, to Jesus, you know.
That's good. That's good. Something real practical if you're watching this and you're on staff with a ministry or any organization. If somebody comes to you, this is something that I implemented probably like 10 years ago, but if somebody comes to you and says, we need to do this, which I feel like sometimes can get pretty overwhelming. Everybody has a good idea. What I did was I created a packet that made them write down their ideas and think through some of the thoughts that I would have to think through if I was going to take responsibility for this. Like, you know, who's going to provide childcare? What's the actual purpose of this? And, you know, it was probably about 3 pages, and I was like, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. Here's our, you know, idea packet, and why don't you fill this out? And then we'll consider your idea once you fill this out and get it back to us.
And then when they fill it out, you say, okay, now go and do it.
No, but the reality is that I don't think I ever had anyone
fill out the packet.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, that's funny, man.
So that was just a good tactic. It does. It's just a tangible way to get ownership back to the other people. So, all right. So 5 levels of discipleship here. We've done infant and child. What's number 3?
Number 3 is a young adult. Now, a young adult is someone who is focusing on God and all they need is to be trained to do the things of God, right? So they're focusing on following God. They're trying to live His will. They're trying to do what God calls them to do. They just need a strategy. So you need to train them in ministry and then release them to go and do ministry opportunities, you know? So get out there, you know, it's like you're teaching someone how to play some sort of sport. You taught them the basics. They understand the basics, and now let them go play. You know, go and do the stuff that God is calling you to do. And I think the job of a discipler, so like for me, I'm seeing like, okay, this is what I need to do as a discipler for people that are in this stage, you know? As a discipler, you're listening and you're saying, okay, what they're saying is like, I love God, I'd like to serve people, how do you think I can do it? Like that kind of reveals the stage that you're in. And so then you're gonna train them and you're gonna release them in some opportunities to go and do the things that they've been called to do.
That's good. That's good. How do you think we make the jump? Because I feel like the jump is huge between child, infant, and young adult. What are some things we can do to help people make that jump from selfish Christianity to now I love God and I want to serve Him and serve people.
Man, well, man, that's the job of the discipler, right? That's the job of the person over them to call them into it. Like I remember I was traveling with a group of young people, and we were doing ministry, and we would call people up to get healed, and I would say, okay, now you guys go do the praying, you know? So instead of me having to go and do it, I created an opportunity for going to do it, and they all saw miracles happen. They all saw amazing things happen. They traveled with another leader the next trip that we went on, and they stopped seeing those things happen. And it wasn't because they couldn't do it, it was because their leader didn't give them an opportunity or create the opportunity to do it. So I call it kicking people out of the boat. Some people will get out of the boat and try to walk on the water, and other people you just need to kick out of the boat, and then they'll see that they can actually walk in the water if you make them try, you know?
Nice. All right, so we've got infant, child, young adult. What's number 4?
Next one up is a parent, right? A parent is someone who's finally made the jump, and they've seen someone get saved, and now they're gonna try to disciple them themselves, you know? So like for a young adult, for a parent, you need to release them to be a discipler, you know? So the training of the person that is now an infant under them is no longer up to you, it's up to them. So it's all releasing to disciple, releasing, maybe training in some discipleship materials, and giving it to them so that they can release it in the people that they're now raising up themselves.
That's good. And then the 5th category
is grandparents. So a grandparent is someone whose child has now had a child, right? And this for me is the ultimate, right? This is Paul saying to Timothy, you know, Timothy, what you've heard from me, entrust to reliable men who will teach others, right? So that's four generations of discipleship. Paul to Timothy, Timothy to reliable men who will teach others. And that's where we're going to, because if we can get the 4th generation in disciple making movements, then we have an epidemic that is spreading, you know, where it's not dependent on you and your giftings. It's fully on God and him pushing what's going on, you know, in the world. And so I think the main job of a grandparent, like if I think about what my parents do with my kids, it's like the main job of a grandparent is to like spoil the grandkids. Nah, I'm just kidding. You know, like, you know, the main job I think is legacy, encouragement, and calling to greatness. You know, grandparent stage is where you want to get to because now you have disciples that are making disciple makers.
Super good. Yeah, I had this thought when we were chatting yesterday. Just this week, I've had a couple people tell me that they're considering leaving our church, and I wonder if people's church experience isn't good because they're still on the fence about things. It's just like if I, in my marriage, was like, well, I'm still on the fence. I'm not sure if I'm going to stick in this or not because I'm not sure, you know, I'm getting what I want out of it, then my marriage would probably really suffer if I came to it with that attitude, right? And so same thing with church or any commitment. If we take ownership of it, and we say, you know what, I'm committing to this church and I'm going to give my all. Maybe I'm not feeling valued in this church, but I'm going to make sure that everyone I interact with feels valued, and then I show up to church with purpose. I'm committed. I'm not leaving. All of a sudden, my church experience becomes totally different, and I feel valued there. Maybe not by people, but by the Lord, because I'm on mission when I go to church, is to help people feel valued. To teach the word, to impart something, to pray for someone, to whatever. So yeah, that level of ownership and commitment to church. What level of discipleship do you feel like that is? If you're taking ownership.
If you're taking ownership, you become a young adult.
Yeah.
I think so. Where you're finally in that stage where you're saying, I'm in this, I'm committed. People talk to me as a pastor, and when people come to our church, man, the one thing that I long for is someone who will come and say, I'm here to serve. I believe in what you're doing. How can I help? Instead of like, I'm going to a church to get fed. Which is totally you're a child if you're going to church to get fed, right? The purpose of church is not to go and get fed. The purpose of the church is to go and get trained in how we can make Jesus famous in our city. And saying, maybe like you go to church, because like whenever we get to a new city, as we've traveled the missions, we're always trying to find a church that we believe in the mission so much that we can devote our lives to what they're doing, and so sometimes you got to kind of church hop till you find that church that is something that you can give fully and believe in what they're doing and give your life to it. That's what I want as a pastor, man. Like, I don't need every person in our city to go to our church, but man, if I can get the people that are coming to be so committed to the mission that they'll do it even if I'm not there, then I know I've got the type of people in our church that we need.
Yeah. I was looking at Acts 2 recently, and just, the famous verses about, and they all, got together and shared everything they had and devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. The church started and developed as an advancing movement. There was people that were dedicated to preaching the gospel to the ends of the earth, and the church formed around the gathering of people that were doing that thing, that were on a mission together. Right. And so, yeah, I just really feel like sometimes our definition of church is a little skewed. If a church is not advancing the gospel, then is it really a church? I don't know. That's a good question to ask. But just to think about, what are we doing in church? Are we advancing the gospel? And am I taking ownership and using my gifts in that place, even if I'm not valued? Even if the senior leader doesn't even know my name, if leadership doesn't know my name, am I still willing to go there and just get my affirmation from the Lord and stack chairs or whatever and encourage other people to give what I wish other people were giving to me when I was there? Can we take ownership of that?
Right.
So, yeah,
totally.
It's good stuff. All right, so in review, the 5 levels of discipleship are
infant, child, young adult, parent, grandparent.
So good. All right, guys, keep going out there and making disciples that make disciple makers.
That's right.
And yeah, thanks for watching. Check out RK. RK, how can people connect with you?
RKisms on the interwebs. Purposeconcepts.com is my site.
Cool. All right, RK, thanks a lot.